Jackson from the Lexington Veterans Association. Welcome. Welcome to our 228th consecutive program of the Lexington Veterans. Isn't that terrific? And as usual, we will begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand, and Bill Stern will lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have a lot of announcements, a lot to go through before our program. We have a couple of introductions, some special guests here. So let me get through it really quick. Once again, our thanks to Starbucks and Lexington Center for the coffee, which really helps make our pre-program social hour so nice. Thanks to everyone who brings the baked goods. They are delicious. We appreciate it. Thanks to everyone who chooses to give us a little cash contribution to help offset our operating expenses. Now, we've had a little bit of problem with our switch over to our new website. Somehow, some names have fallen off our database. If you have not been getting our notices of meetings, we apologize. And the simplest way to fix it, would you please go to the clipboard on the food table and just give us your name and your email address. Again, we'll be sure to put you back on. And if you're new here, if this is your first time with us, first or second, and you would like to receive regular notices of our programs and speakers, we encourage you to sign up as well. Speaking of our website, our new web address, I'm sorry, we really should have had it up here as visual. I think you've all received notices of it, but do remember if you want to go to our website, it used to be very long and very involved. Lexington, I won't tell you the old one. The new one, www.lex, L-E-X, MA, M-A for Massachusetts, vets. That's it. Lex, MA, vets.org. That's our new website. We've got an interesting handout. We have several handouts on that table. The majority of them our speaker will talk about because they belong to her and the program. But there's one interesting one, the 8.5 by 11 sheets. Margaret Donovan from our executive committee, formerly associated here with the library, has made up a wonderful list of all the DVDs of former programs given here at the Veterans Association. She's sorted them by program, by topic. So if you want to see all the DVDs that are available here in the library on the shelves for taking out and viewing in your home, you can take one of those handouts. It's an amazing collection. Thank you, Margaret. Okay, I'd like to just do a quick introduction at this moment. The young man in the corner, why don't you come a little forward so people can see you. This is Tom Spires. You may have seen Tom before. He's been with us for a few months now, Tom? Since September. He is our audiovisual intern, and he is a junior at Lexington High School. So welcome, Tom. We really appreciate his help. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our brand new Bedford Lexington Veterans Services agent, Gina, Rader. She has been on the job since December 15, and she's going to just say a few words to us.
Thank you. For those of you who want to know where my office is, it's in the Senior Center in Lexington. We do Lexington, Bedford together, Veteran Services. So if you knew Ryan Lennon, I took Ryan's position. He moved a little bit closer to his home state, same job. I was in the Air Force for 6 years. I was a medic in the Air Force, and I live in Bedford. So I'm really excited to be the Veterans Director for my own community. And if you want a phone number for me, I don't have any business cards yet because I'm so new that they're not in yet. But I could give you my phone number, so if anyone is interested, I can give you my office number afterwards. Put it up here. I don't know. Nope, that's Elizabeth. She's going to go in a little while. My phone number, I could give you afterwards, so if anyone is interested. And I'm sure that you all know, but we do, or I do, Veteran Services, disability, pension, health care, the Massachusetts benefits. So if you have any questions, veteran-related, I'm your person.
Gina will be an active member of the Lexington Veterans Association. You'll be seeing her often, and we're absolutely delighted to welcome her. Okay, does anyone else have an announcement or an item of interest that you want to share? Sir.
On the website, Ed, you can explain this better than I can, but if you want to talk about the Google search engine and so forth, because they won't get Lexington.
You're all probably finding that you're trying to do a search to find this Mass Vets. Search tools take a while to catch up with a new domain. It could be months. We're trying to push it now. We're trying to force it to happen. In the meantime, wherever you put your typical URL at the top of your page, just put in www.vetmassvets.org and you'll get it. Okay? So you can get it. It's just that unfortunately when you Google search it or any of the other search tools like Yahoo, you might get it. Are a problem right now. That's nothing anybody can do about except try to get somebody to force it to happen. Okay? It takes a long time when you got a new domain name. Okay?
So just the old-fashioned way, type it in, www, I think we need to do that for some reason, .org. Okay, well, I'm sure you're anxious to hear from our speaker. So let me tell you a little bit about Elizabeth Price. Elizabeth is a graduate of Quinnipiac University in Hamden, Connecticut. She earned a master's in social work from Boston College in 2006. During her graduate studies, she got an internship at the Bedford VA Medical Center. Now, she found this a very comfortable fit and a good environment. Her grandfather was a World War II and a Korean War veteran. She felt good about contributing to the war effort, and she was doing very innovative work. This internship led to a full-time job as a clinical social worker, and she's been there ever since. Elizabeth is part of a new initiative begun in 2006 called the Returning Veterans Program. The VA is aiming to learn from their past experiences. And they've developed a comprehensive menu of services ready and in place to assist newly returning veterans in transition. Today, there are many more services available, and they are delivered faster. Even with all the improvements to the system, it can still be complicated for a veteran to figure out how to access this array of benefits. Elizabeth and her team provide direct services, such as counseling, but they also teach veterans how to navigate the VA system to get the coverage and the services they deserve. Elizabeth will talk about the challenges facing returning veterans and the many services provided by the VA. So, please welcome Elizabeth Price.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and to all of you in the audience, which I know there are many veterans yourselves. Thank you for your service and your continued interest in this effort here. Really appreciate it. So yes, I am a social worker at the VA in Bedford, and we do a lot of things, and part of what we do is try to outreach to our community partners. So events like this, anywhere we can have a presence outside the clinic of the VA hospital to connect with our community, but also to connect with other veterans, because as we know, VA and veterans benefits is a big, sometimes a big web. So to make that more accessible is one of our goals for sure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this particular population that I'm working with, some of the things that we're seeing, some of the trends, what we're working on at the VA, and also in general some of the VA services. Just in 45 minutes, I would never have enough time to cover the vast programs that we offer. However, if there is a particular interest that you guys have, I'd be happy to either come back myself or coordinate in the future to come back and talk about another specialty. So and if you can't hear me or you can't see, please raise your hand, let me know. But basically what we're talking about are veterans that are coming home from deployment. So the VA loves its acronyms, and so does the military, right? So we're talking about OEF, OIF, and OND veterans. And I just spelled it out here. It basically describes the campaign, where the veterans served. Iraq, Afghanistan, some of the surrounding countries that are incorporated in this conflict. So these are the veterans that I'm speaking about specifically tonight. So what does the population look like? You know, I think when I started at the VA a couple of years ago, providers who had worked mostly with older veterans really were looking for that veteran who was going to be young and fit and coming in and kind of look like a kid. Well, a lot of them did. However, we know there's definitely a mix of ages of this new returning veteran population that we're seeing. So I have here, we definitely have more women going into active duty. Therefore, we're seeing more women come out in the veteran population. So it's about 15% now of the total veteran population, continuing to increase. So we expect to see more and more females continuing to go into the military, and therefore, when they come to us, they're discharged and they're coming in as veterans. We also know that Massachusetts does not have big military installations like other parts of the country, right? Like Texas, California. We have Hanscom Air Force Base, but we're mostly seeing National Guard and reservists in our area. So at the Bedford VA, and mostly Massachusetts and New England in general, we're actually seeing a lot of National Guard and reservists. So that means that person could have been in the military, you know, their whole career, and they're getting activated to deploy actually later in life, 40s, 50s. So we're definitely seeing a mix of ages. So there is not the ability to pick the new veteran out of the crowd, right? Because it could really be of any age. And that's very interesting for me to think about what the challenges might be for those veterans once they come home from deployment and they're trying to reintegrate back into their life, because they could very well be on their own for the first time. They went into the military after high school, they were for active duty for a couple of years, and now they're paying the bills on their own. They're going to school maybe for the first time in a couple of years, and maybe back living at home, maybe on their own for the first time, figuring out how to balance, you know, being on their own. But then we also see Guard and reservists who are deploying, like I said, maybe in their 40s and 50s, so they're coming home to a whole different set of challenges for their readjustment. Their families, their kids, they may have had a full career as a civilian and because of an injury have to change that career much later in life. So the adjustment is definitely impacted differently depending on the stage of life someone may go to war. This is actually just a graph on a graph. The blue lines are showing that overall, the veteran population is declining. We know veterans are dying, they're moving. Unfortunately, the veteran population as a whole is declining. However, the female population as a whole is continuing to increase. So that was just a visual that I wanted to share. Part of what we want to do, especially at Bedford, is outreach, because we know that there are fewer and fewer veterans, but we still know that many veterans do not access their VA benefits. So that just wanted to put that out there as well. So what are these veterans experiencing? Everything that I'm going to show you has been shared with me by veterans that I work with to help me understand, as someone who has not deployed to a combat zone, what it could potentially have been like. What were the impacts on their health, on their well-being, and what might be their impacts on readjustment. So I'm going to show a couple of visuals. This is certainly, the environment, right? So we know that it is extremes. Could be extremely mountainous, could be extremely hot, could be more of a urban environment, cities, right? Depending on someone's job and where they were deployed, they may have multiple different types of environments that they are exposed to. Certainly the elements, the weather, right? The terrain, the sand, right? Those of you that know it probably have ideas as well. This is an example of something that we know about this conflict, that people might be exposed to, what we call airborne hazards, burn pits. We know that a lot of material, a lot of waste, pretty much anything could get thrown in a pit, lit on fire, and burned, right? That's great, quick way to get rid of things, but what does that mean for what we're breathing in? What are the long-term consequences on our health? So one of the things that is being recognized is the potential health impact from the airborne hazards, right? So we have an Agent Orange registry, exams, benefits, that we know the health implications from that chemical. What we're trying to figure out with this war is how being exposed to the air and some of these burning materials could impact veterans from this war. So we have a very similar process of trying to get veterans engaged and answer some questionnaires, get some health exams, and try to study this over time. You may hear in the news that the brain injury is the signature wound of this war, that our enemies are getting very creative with the way they like to terrorize us and use explosives, right? So the IED, the improvised explosive device, is very damaging, right? But we know that people are actually surviving these injuries more because of the gear that we have, the technology. So we may have loss of limb, we may have other concussion type of brain injury, but people are actually surviving where they may have not in other wars. But again, what is the impact of this? I have a short clip I would like to show you all of an IED. It's about 10 seconds. It is a blast. So if people are uncomfortable or they don't wish to view it, you can feel free to take a break if you'd like. Whoop. So I show this clip because actually neither vehicle was hit, right? So the direct impact was on neither vehicle, so we can assume that, there weren't injuries here. But why I show it is because the intensity still grabs you. I know I didn't have the volume all the way up, but I'm not trained to look for IEDs. However, I didn't see anything in the road, and it didn't sound like the people in these vehicles did either. But what I like about showing this clip is it gives a little bit of what it might be like on a 24/7 basis to have that as part of your job. That the threat could be anywhere, anytime, any place. And so you might actually be doing the best you can to look for these cues, pieces of trash in the road or electronics or things that could set off an explosive, but sometimes it's just unpredictable. So if this is the experience for driving for the veterans that we're seeing, for the year they're deployed, they've learned to drive a certain way because this is reality. This is a very dangerous and unpredictable situation that they need to be ready for all of the time, right? So what we know is veterans become very good at that. They adapt to it, they train for it, they learn for it, they become hyper alert that this is their environment. And the threat level is very high and very real. And so what I see when veterans come home and they're now driving on 95 in rush hour, and they do see something that makes them feel uncomfortable and doesn't look right, out of the ordinary, they may react as if this is what is going to happen, right? So it's an automatic response. We call that the hypervigilance response, where all of these senses are hyper alert for the most dangerous potential threat that could happen. And in war, that's very real. On 95, the threat of an explosive is relatively low, but the automatic response in the body, we know, just doesn't shut off when you hit U.S. soil. So there definitely are a lot of readjustment considerations that we work with veterans around that they didn't anticipate, right? They're in survival mode, and now they have to switch gears into civilian mode. They may not have driven on our highways in a long time. So I hear from people, they're getting into accidents, they're getting speeding tickets, they're running red lights because it doesn't feel safe to them to drive on our roads, or no one will drive with them because they're flying down the road at 100 miles an hour, and they're trying to make the connection of why they're doing this and how to feel safe on our highways now. I have a couple slides about some of the most common injuries that we're hearing about. So orthopedic injuries is definitely the #1 complaint that the VA is seeing, right? Back pain, knee pain, ankle pain, shoulder pain. And what I like to ask people in their primary care is say to them, what was your job and how much gear do you have to carry? So here's a photo maybe of someone carrying, lots and lots of extra pounds on their body. Their gear, their weapons, their ammo. I'm sure if they were a medic, Gina, you could tell us there's extra stuff, extra vests, right? Radios, food, maybe water. You guys are veterans, you know it. So what is the lasting impact on our joints for a whole year in and out of vehicles? I know that those shoes are probably not the most comfortable shoes. People come back with feet issues all the time. And females are carrying just as much on a smaller frame. So, this service member may have actually completed their tour, did very well, had no major injuries that sent them home early. They come home and they're like, oh my gosh, everything hurts. And they're coming in and perhaps they're very young and they're trying to figure out how to manage pain at a very young age. And the reality is this was their job. And they powered through and they didn't complain or ever see a doctor. And now they're trying to figure out what to do. I put this quote, I feel like I'm 80 years old. I don't know what veterans think that's going to feel like. Maybe some of you guys know, but I think it's a lot of aches and pains. So I hear a lot of young people say it's very difficult to get out of bed. They're getting diagnosed with things like arthritis and disc issues, and they're going to physical therapy for multiple orthopedic issues, and they did not plan on that. Of course, I put up here some of the most common things that we see. And a lot of what I see coming through my clinic is the mental health piece of it. That readjustment to civilian life, right? Whether it's trauma-related, anxiety, substance abuse, being away in a war zone is going to impact the veteran and their family on some level. So we do see a lot of people who come home and they do have a loss, right? Getting out of the military in itself is a loss. Loss of structure, camaraderie, purpose, mission. That veteran may have done the most important thing they've done in their life, and they had their friends, responsibility. They were multitasking. They were on the adrenaline high for a whole year, and now they're home, and now they're trying to figure out what they want to do next. And it just isn't quite as exciting or efficient in the civilian world, right? So we definitely see people who have had very specific trauma that gives them, symptoms of post-traumatic stress, difficulty sleeping, high anxiety, trouble in relationships. But then we do see a lot of veterans who are just trying to figure out their way since they've been back. Hearing loss is the #1 service-connected disability, I believe, for all era veterans, and we're seeing that a lot with this group as well, ringing in the ears, hearing loss. So that's something we're asking people about. We talked about pain, some of the respiratory issues that we might see as a result of breathing in some of the airborne toxins. We're asking veterans about their skin. Are they having any rashes? Were they bit by sand fleas or other pests in the desert? And how is that affecting their functioning? And then also the GI issues. How are they doing digestively, right? Something that people kind of brush off, I think, when they're deployed because they're in another country, but did a veteran pick up any parasites or have any issues related to their stomach? So these are the types of things that we're asking this group of veterans specifically to try to be really proactive, that if they can get these things addressed now, it might help prevent further issues down the road. And of course, we'll talk more about the TBI. So what are some of the adjustment considerations, right? Veteran deploys, they come home, they're trying to figure out what is next. So one of the things in my program that we talk a lot about is those Warzone skills transitioning into civilian life. So we know veterans have a lot of skills. They're highly trained individuals, very smart, very efficient, very fearless. They're not quite sure how to transition that sometimes into a civilian resume, or how to market that, or how to be in school at maybe a community college with students who are 18 years old and they've never left home. They feel really isolated, kind of, you know, the outlier there. But we're also talking about things like driving. That type of driving to avoid that IED is actually really dangerous here. Swerving, going very fast. We talk about that with weapons as well. On deployment, active duty, your weapon is an extension of your body. Wouldn't think of not having it, right? Wouldn't be safe without it. But here, probably not the safest idea to be sleeping with their weapon, with kids in the house or with unpredictable schedule, but that's not quite what they're used to. This is also something we talk with families about. You know, a veteran may actually feel closer to their service member buddies than they do their family. And they may have a hard time talking about their experiences with their family, but have an easier time opening up to those they served with. And that can be very difficult for the family member who is just anxiously waiting for them to come home and then may feel a disconnect. I put in here in red the stigma of seeking help. So we know that veterans are very proud, right? And in the military, even though it's getting recognized more over time, asking for help may be perceived as admitting a weakness. And so we're trying to help veterans understand that sometimes asking for help will actually show a lot of strength, taking care of themselves, putting themselves first, which might not be what they're used to if they're always used to looking out for their buddy and taking care of everyone else first. The thought to themselves they need to get some help is like, you know, a very foreign concept. So trying to get veterans to help each other is one of the ways that we're doing that at the VA and in other organizations, to get peers helping each other to recognize some of the signs of maybe trauma or depression or substance abuse, some of the ways that they might be struggling, and help each other get into treatment as well. The other interesting part about this population is we know a lot of National Guard and reservists are still in the military, or they're in other civil service jobs like police, fire. They don't necessarily know if they ask for help how that might impact their career, how they would be perceived. So that's another thing we're trying to really educate people, that asking for help is not necessarily a weakness, it's actually a strength of getting their health taken care of. I'm not going to go through every single one in detail, but this is some of the things that we really try to look out for returning veterans. How are they dealing with being home? Are they drinking a couple of beers before they go out to the store because they're feeling very anxious in a crowded place? Are they finding that they're not going to the doctor, but they're finding other ways to manage their pain? Are they having difficulty communicating with their significant other about their sleep habits, or don't want to really say where they're going and when they'll be back? Having a hard time with missing things while they were gone for their kids. So relationships, unemployment, you know, figuring out again, what is my purpose now that I'm back and now that I'm home? If someone isn't working, if any of us aren't working, we get laid off, we lose a job, that's a big part of who we are, right? So for veterans who are trying to re-identify what they want to do for work, that's a big piece of the puzzle. And all of these things are programs that we offer assistance with through the VA and through the state as well. So there's another clip, it's a couple of minutes. I'm going to come back to it actually, just on time. It's also a pretty graphic clip, so I'll give you a choice if you want to stick around for it at the end. Okay. So one of the other things that we know the impact of deployment has is, of course, on the veteran's family. And family we define as anyone that they define close to them. That's a support. Could be a husband, wife, girlfriend, brother, girlfriend, boyfriend, brother, sister. But we know a lot of veterans have other family members that they consider part of their family, and being away certainly has an impact, of course, on the family here. So I have some notes about just the cycle for the family and for the veteran, what that might be like, preparing for deployment, making plans about that, having the veteran leave, adjusting, and then having the veteran come back. And some of the tricky things that the veteran doesn't really anticipate is that actually their family and their kids are very resilient. So they figure it out when they're at home, right? It's impacting them, of course, but a new set of norms start to get established. Someone else picks up the chores that that person had. Someone else picks up, maybe paying the bills or organizing the role that that person had at the family, so the family can continue to kind of chug along. So then the veteran comes home and they're like, wait a second, I used to do that. I used to do that. I used to put the kids to bed. Like now they have this new routine without me. Where do I fit back in here? And the significant other counting the days till the vet gets home. The veterans counting the days till they can get home. They have this magical idea of what that reunion's going to be like. But the reality is we tell people, go on a date. You have to really get to know each other again. You've been apart for a long time. And that can be really hard because expectations are always going to be different than the reality of the impact of the situation. This picture here is clearly a laptop, a baby being born. Technology is certainly a blessing and a curse for our deployed service members right now. We know that they have access to home much more than any other war, right? So other wars, you left, wrote a letter when you could, but for the family member, they knew they weren't going to hear from you. So they were able to completely reframe. And for you, you knew you weren't going to really hear from them much except for through a letter. But now, because we have Skype, we have computers, we have more access to phone lines, they're, depending on the person's job, may have the ability to communicate on a very regular basis, right? So that's great. However, then that becomes, another thing that really the veteran is kind of part of. But if they're on the phone with their significant other and then their girlfriend says, our child is having a problem at school, having a really hard time, I can't pay this bill, I don't know what to do, the car's in the shop, the service member and the veteran can't really do much about it. So they're trying to figure out how to stay alive on their next mission, and yet they know all of this is going on at home and they really can't fix it for them. The other thing is on the family side, they might get used to a call every couple of days and say there's technology blackout, where the military shuts down communication, maybe something's happened, maybe who knows what. The family doesn't hear from them for a week. Their mind is racing. What has happened? Something went wrong. I haven't heard from them. So again, it can be a very great thing, but it can also increase more stress. I hear from veterans who go online, they go on Facebook, social media, and they see pictures of their girlfriend with other guys, and they're so distracted, and they're like, oh my gosh, what's happening at home? I'm not here. And those things complicate their ability to do their job. So it is a little bit of a double-edged sword there. Switching gears a little bit to one of the other new initiatives nationwide through DOD, through the VA, through our state, is suicide prevention awareness. This is a really tricky topic because a lot of people, consider this a little bit of a taboo issue, but the reality is that this is an issue, and it's an issue for veterans. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the suicide prevention program through the VA. So what we know is that there was a statistic put out last year that 22 veterans commit suicide a day, which is a lot. One is too many. So the question is how to be proactive and prevent this. One of the ways that the VA has tried to work on this is through a hotline. So that was the number that I showed here. It's a 24/7 hotline. It's tied into our national crisis hotline through Samaritans. And basically, if you call the hotline, somebody picks up, you can press 1 if you're a veteran, a family member of a veteran, and it will direct you to a VA employee who has been trained in military culture, issues facing veterans, A lot of our dispatchers are actually veterans themselves, and they will talk a veteran through whatever the crisis is that they're going through and provide support. It's confidential. However, if the person on the other end, the veteran who called, does want to give their name, the person on our staff can go into their medical record if they're a VA patient and see what medication they're taking, if they're in treatment for anything, if they're in counseling, and follow up with them directly. If they need, obviously, the police sent to their house to help them get to a hospital, they can coordinate that as well. So this crisis line specifically for veterans was launched in 2007, and there was a huge campaign. If a veteran was in crisis, call this number 24/7, you're not alone. And it actually had a slogan, it takes the strength of a warrior, I think, to ask for help. And it really was to try to bring some awareness that veterans are struggling and they're not speaking up and they're not getting the support that they need. Since 2007, the crisis line has received more than 1.1 million calls, which shows us that veterans are looking for that support and feeling like perhaps they don't have other places to turn, so they're picking up the phone. And that 325,000 rescues have happened, which means the veteran on the other end is seriously thinking about taking their life, and we've sent police to their house to bring them into the hospital where they can receive treatment. Because we know technology is, moving faster than the speed of light, apparently, they've increased access by a chat line and a text feature as well. Why is that number so high? Why is this such a risky population? Well, some of the reasons that we know veterans might be likely or more likely than the general population to think about suicide and actually take their lives is because we know that veterans are really comfortable around guns. And we know that guns is a very lethal way to hurt yourself and a very successful way to kill yourself. And we know that veterans are very comfortable around guns, actually have a lot of guns in the home. And that's something that, as a VA provider, we ask veterans all the time. Do you have guns at home? Do you have gun locks? We'll give out free gun locks and talk with veterans about gun safety and their significant others as well. We know that other factors like chronic pain, debilitating injuries, multiple deployments, trauma, head injury, substance abuse, all of those factors are risk factors for veterans as well. So a lot of times we'll see on the news if there's been something that happens on a base, it might be a suicide or something like that, but we know there's a lot more not reported and not publicized. So it definitely is something that we want people to be aware of and to be aware that there is help available as well. So we're going to switch gears again to the general VA program. So I've mentioned a couple programs, suicide prevention, program that I work in. Obviously we have medical services as well, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what the VA is and what we provide. Is there anyone that's not familiar with the VA at all, or are you guys pretty much experts in this room? Okay. Well, there's a lot to talk about with the VA, so I'm going to keep it really simple. But I see the VA as having two legs. One is the healthcare side, and that's what we do at the VA hospital in Bedford, provide veterans day-to-day health care. Might be their flu shot and their checkup, or if they have any injuries, illnesses, we want to provide them the treatment. The other leg is the benefits administration. Anything that deals with money, right? Disability payments, education benefits, home loan assistance, burial benefits. So we know that the VA has a lot of different benefits to offer veterans. What are some of the services that we offer at the hospital? This is just a range of them. Of course, I brought some more information as well. Everything from primary care checkup to specialties, women's health, substance abuse treatment, employment services, housing. We have a new peer program, so if a veteran only wants to talk to a veteran who's gone through the services, who's been in the military, they don't want to talk to a psychiatrist or a social worker, they can start and talk with a veteran, get comfortable, and then proceed if they'd like. We have specialties. I put in red here the caregiver program. that offers support to the people at home who are taking care of the veteran, that are helping them with their injuries, that are helping them with their medication, that are really keeping them on track and doing a lot of the support at home. That is a real toll on that caregiver, so we want to make sure that they have the support that they need as well. That last bullet I have here, the education resources, I wanted to mention because we know that veterans are likely, when they come home, to use their education benefits, right? So they get home, they're trying to figure out what to do next with their life, they might need some income, and the GI Bill for veterans who've served after 9/11 is very lucrative. It's a good amount of money per month, pays tuition, and it's a great way for veterans to get back into school and figure out what they want to do without completely stressing about their bills and their income. So we know a veteran is more likely to maybe start school than come in and say, I'm having this health issue. So we've actually started to collaborate more with our local colleges and have services located at the schools. So if a veteran enrolls in school, we have a VA employee that they can meet with and enroll in VA healthcare. And we'll say to them, do you have your shots? Do you have insurance? Have you seen a primary care? Do you need to see the dentist? Get them through the door and then talk with them a little bit more about how are you sleeping? How are your relationships? How is your pain level? A lot of times, veteran will tell us, oh, we're fine, good, check, yes, 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 everything's great, I'm good, I don't need to see you again. But then they get in school and they're maybe struggling with memory, concentration, taking notes, anxiety. Maybe they can't figure out where to sit in their college classroom because having people behind them makes them very anxious and it feels unsafe. But maybe if they sit in the back, they can't hear the teacher because they have some hearing loss. And this wasn't something that they ever predicted, right? Everyone thinks they're a superhero, come home, I'll be great, I'll just jump back into life. But there are these impacts, unfortunately. So we want to support them in their education goals, make them successful at school, but also address some of these real unique challenges that they may have that there's other students in the class may not be familiar with and the professor might not be familiar with. So the school program is also a new program through the VA as well. We know, of course, we have Gina here that can talk about the state resources, but we know there's a lot of assistance, whether it's, again, through peers in the state outreach program, financial support, disability claims. The state of Massachusetts is much more generous and supportive to our local veterans financially and with staff in the community than a lot of other states. And we actually have veterans will move here because they know how well veterans are treated in this state compared to supports in other places. And so, you know, having a veteran connect somewhere is really the goal. Opening that door for them to come in, make an initial appointment, talk to someone about what they're going through. And if they're struggling financially or with housing, obviously meet those basic needs first, have a safe place to live, and then address everything after that. We know that for a lot of veterans, they are very nervous about the disability process. They don't know what that means. You know, it's very complicated. But basically, if a veteran's been injured or has an illness from their time on active duty, they can put in a claim for disability, and it's a huge benefit. It covers their health care and it assists in their financial income. So if they have to take a day off from work or they have to rearrange maybe what they're doing for a job, this hopefully will supplement some income. There's a lot of other details with that I'm not going to go into. I put here as well that the geriatric services at the VA in Bedford are a huge part of what we do there. I haven't touched on any of those today because our topic was about some of the new veterans coming through, but I do just want to gently mention that we do have a lot of services at the VA right here in Bedford that people come from all over the different states, especially in New England, for our hospice and geriatric, Alzheimer's care, caregiver support. So there are a lot of programs out here where a veteran can come in when they're very young and they can stay with us through the remainder of all their healthcare needs that they might need as they age. And that's something that we're really excited about at Bedford. Here are the locations for the VAs and our clinics in our neck of the woods. These clinics here are satellite clinics. So they're located in the community, and we usually have kind of a sampling of services, and then we have the main hospital at Bedford. How does someone get healthcare through the VA? The VA is completely separate from the military. A lot of people assume it's part of the military. It's actually a whole separate branch of the government. When a veteran is eligible for the VA, when they actually get off of orders. So that discharge papers, those DD-214s, that's the golden ticket for veteran benefits. They apply through the VA, and if they have the minimum duty requirements, the appropriate discharge and income, all of that's reviewed, and they may be eligible for VA health care. If anyone in the audience has specific questions about that, or you're interested for yourself, I actually have the applications here and can talk with you more about it. But veterans can apply online, they can apply in person, and it's a national system. It's a federal benefit, right? It's a benefit that veterans have earned. It's not a handout. It's part of their benefits package from their service. If they enroll in the Bedford VA and they move to California or they're on vacation, they can use the VA there. We would just transfer their care. But it's very, very low or no cost health care. There's no annual fee. There's no deductible. If a veteran has a disability rating, it's free care for the rest of their life. And this is something that we really want to educate our veterans about, because a lot of veterans don't actually use the VA. And the veterans are the only population that we serve at the VA. So we like to think that it's our specialty to really meet the needs of this group. For veterans who've served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the campaigns that I've been talking about today, they actually have 5 years where they have an even more enhanced benefit through the VA, where they can come in and anything they tell us is an injury or illness related to their deployment, it's free care. They could say, you know, I've had asthma every month since I've been back, and I think it's because, you know, the burn pit that I was exposed to, or I have back pain, I need back surgery. Anything they tell us is deployment related, it's a combat related injury, it's free care. So it's a great time for them to be proactive for their health and not put it off and say, oh, it's fine, I'm fine, and then, you know, 20 years later, then they're really in trouble. So we're really trying to work with our local military, our schools, anywhere we can reach this population of veterans to educate them about getting their needs met now. And we know that from past generations, a lot of Vietnam veterans did not use services for a lot of good reasons, right? VA was totally different VA back then. We're trying to really turn that ship in a whole different direction. If a veteran gets out of the military, they'll have 6 months where they can get a free dental exam. So one of the ways that we try to get around that stigma of mental health is sell things like the dental exam. So I've become more of a PR marketer in my job than I ever thought I would be. But if I can get someone to walk through the door and get their teeth checked out, maybe get a flu shot, build a little bit of a relationship, then we can maybe find out actually how they're doing, how they're functioning, and how they're feeling. If you are online savvy, we've beefed up our website in the last year. We actually have a lot more to offer people who are going online to see, actually, what do you do over there? I've passed that building, but I've never actually gone in to see what you offer. We have a resource guide online where you can sort through and search by, you know, any department, geriatrics, primary care, specialty care, social work, see what we do offer. The VA in the last couple of years has tried to offer more recreational activities to get veterans together, right? And have it be kind of a fun activity, but also something that might help them in their recovery, whether it's art therapy, using the pool and the gym, going to a basketball game together, taking an archery class, trying to really incorporate some creative ways to help veterans in their trying to figure out what they like to do. Now that they're at the military, maybe they're trying not to drink, use drugs, hang out with you know, the right crowd. How do they want to spend their time? And so that's a big push of what is the lifestyle that they want to have so they can have the most quality of life that they can. A lot of websites, I can send them out through your group if you'd like, but there's a lot of information online. I have some information on the table as well. I know I have maybe 10, 15 minutes left. Want to see if there were questions I gave you a lot of information, so hoping that you do have some questions.
Yes, I do. Does the military have a formal process of transition, like a week of school saying this is what you might encounter after?
Good question. So the question was, does the military actually have something built in as a transition school to as veterans are getting out? And the answer is yes and no. So I know with the National Guard and the reserves, the answer is yes. Over the last couple of years, it's become a real part of their post-deployment and actually their pre-deployment. They have what's called a yellow ribbon event, and it's at a hotel. Their families and friends are invited, and it's like an expo. It's like a conference. They have to go to a whole bunch of different stations, get information. People like myself are there, and they get briefings. They get talks about, here's what you may experience, and if you're experiencing this, here's what you need to do. Classes on budgeting, classes on weight management, finances, anything that they may have questions about, kid-related issues, parenting. So the National Guard and Reserves, yes. They also have different increments. So we may see a unit come home from Afghanistan, and then we're going to see them in 60 days. And by we, I mean the military, the VA, our vet centers, our vet counseling centers, and other groups in the community that support veterans, and they're going to give them an actual assessment. How are you doing with sleep? How are you doing physically? How are you doing emotionally? Are you having any thoughts of harming yourself? They answer a questionnaire. A lot of people are still reluctant to identify as having any problems, but they're exposed to the resources. Then we see them again a couple of months later. So there's some built-in increments where the veterans are being asked about these things with the Guard and Reserves. With active duty, it's much trickier because we in Massachusetts may not quite have the ability to get all of those veterans together in one place to give them a briefing. So they do get a transition class when they get out. However, as some of you guys may know who've served as well, a lot of people just want to get home. So they will just say, give me the paper, and then as soon as they leave, it's tunnel vision to getting home. The last thing they want to hear about is their dental benefit and what paperwork they have to do. So yes and no, I think is the answer to that. Yes, sir.
I think one of the great treasures at the Bedford VA is that wonderful pool. I've used it for years. Everybody, it's wonderful.
Yes, we do have a heated pool at the VA, and we have a gym. Glad you're taking advantage of it. Yeah.
This looks like a lot of change in programs and services for current and recent veterans. Has much changed for veterans of World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and the older guys?
So I'm just speaking specifically today about the program that I work in, but I can tell you the impact is really on all services, right? Because say we recognize the needs with this group that we need more mental health support, we need more physical therapy support, we need more primary care doctors. Well, that's going to impact every generation because more people are going to get hired and there's going to be more programs developing. So yes, I think we do have some specialized programs that have cropped up, but things like the suicide prevention program sees all era veterans. Programs like our rehab programs, all era veterans. At Bedford, we just opened a brand new hospice unit. That's, of course, seeing some of our elder veterans. In Bedford, we do a dementia program. So the VA's programs are expanding. I'm speaking just to the ones specifically for returning veterans. However, there absolutely, I think, is a shift all over. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir, in the back, Ed? So the Veterans Choice Program, those of you who are veterans, if you haven't already, you're going to get a letter with a card. It might be pretty confusing, but it's called the Veterans Choice Program. And it's an initiative where the president allocated a certain couple of $1 million, I think, to this program in an effort to increase access to timely and local appointments at the VA. So a veteran would be eligible to use their card if they are not able to get into a VA appointment within 30 days, if they had to take a plane or a boat to get to a VA, or if they had to drive more than, I think, 40 or 50 miles to get to a VA appointment. Luckily, we don't have those geographic issues very much here in New England, but in places like Alaska and even Vermont, they do have some of those logistic issues. What the benefit will be is to get people through the door quicker. So if you go in, you see your doctor, and you need to see a podiatrist, but we can't get you in within 30 days, we can't get you into another VA that's close to you, they will assist you to use that card to go see a provider outside of the VA. So the goal is to increase access. Everyone's going to get a card, but not everyone is going to need to ever use it. You know you'll need to use it when you have that conversation with your provider. Try to schedule something. Good question. Gresh?
Would you speak to the outreach program that the VA is initiating?
Sure. At Bedford or
At Bedford, yes,
in general?
specific.
So the question was about the outreach program. So as you guys saw on that slide, we know that the veteran population as a whole is declining. And we know that a lot of veterans don't use the VA. So we do really hope to increase what we call outreach to the community to make that connection, to increase the amount of veterans that actually use their benefits, right? A lot of veterans tell us, let someone else use it. I'm pretty healthy, I have other insurance, let someone who needs it more use it, right? Because veterans are very looking out for everyone else, again. But the situation is we want veterans to use the benefits that they've earned. The more veterans that we actually get through the door, the more funding that we can get. So the more programming that we can provide is actually part of that is more veterans that we can bring in. So by you using your benefits, it may actually open something up for someone else. So we're trying to figure out creative ways to reach those veterans in the community that might not know about what they're eligible for. So part of that is going to different events where we think there might be veterans, holding different events, whether it's a town hall at the Veterans Hospital where people can actually talk directly to our leadership, or whether it's going to a sporting game and setting up a table, like at the Lowell Spinners, or going to different colleges and other places where you think there might be veterans and just talking to them about how to sign up, how to make an appointment, make the VA a little bit more accessible. So what are you thinking? Yes, sir?
I'm surprised that you're saying there are fewer veterans given the length of the recent wars we've had. Is there a trend line that you can see there?
So I can speak to over the years that I've worked at Bedford, every year we see an increase in the returning veterans that are coming through the VA, but in the general population, the overall population is declining, especially in New England. And some of that may be because it is volunteer and people are actually redeploying. So we have people that have 3, 4, 5 deployments. So we've been at war for a very long time. However, we actually have a little bit of a pool that's continuing to deploy. So it's a tricky thing. I think we will continue to see the returning veterans come in over time, especially as the war is winding down. People are less concerned about some of that stigma. I would see people who would still be in the National Guard or Reserves, and they would say to me, oh, I never sleep. I have nightmares every night. I have an anger problem, big time, but I'm not going to come in and go to counseling for it because I want to go back. I want to redeploy. I'm much more comfortable and feel really good, and I know, I have confidence in my job, my mission when I'm deployed. So they just wanted to keep deploying. Those are the folks that when they're completely out, I think we'll see more and more of them coming in. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Elizabeth, there's a construction project for homeless housing at the Bedford Hospital. Could you comment on that?
Sure. So I think it's going to be breaking ground this year, but those dates are always a little flexible, right? And it is a housing program for 55 and over. People in the community and veterans, low income. So it's going to be built, if you know the VA in Bedford, you know there's the golf course across the street. There's some old chicken coops that are to the left. I don't think there's any chicken in there, but you never know. Apparently that's where there's going to be some construction, and it's going to be a senior housing development. And it's a partnership between the VA and the housing authorities to help fund it, because it will be for low-income seniors, and there will be specific slots and apartments specifically for veterans.
About a year ago, the news media were full of stories of scandals at the VA health systems, largely related to waiting times and services and so forth. As a result of all that publicity, has much changed, or are some of your initiatives coming from a response to that? What effect did all that exposure, how have those scandals been treated and resolved or not resolved?
So I can't speak for the specifics of the VAs that were really publicized, but I do know that, anytime there's an event that we hear about in the news, every VA looks at our own process. So what it did do was actually really encourage every VA to look at, what is our flow like? How quickly are we getting veterans in? And whether these things are a direct result of the news or not, there's still efforts to make sure that we are providing timely service, the best care possible that we can. And I think programs like the Veterans Choice is a way to assist in some of the areas that perhaps veterans were telling us over time. It's really difficult for me to get to appointments, and look at different clinics that we were having a hard time getting people into.
Do you know of any publication that summarizes the response to those problems a year ago, and assessments of what progress or changes have been made?
Yes, I do remember there were some public responses that were brought out by the secretary, and certainly we had some changeover in staff. I don't have the web address. I could certainly try to find it for you, that did talk about what the national response was. Mm-hmm.
Veterans given any priority? Bedford, you have openings, given new programs. Are they given any priority at all in terms of being?
So veterans in general are given preference, especially veterans who have a disability will get preference through a lot of different employers, including federal jobs. So I wouldn't say necessarily that one era is getting preference over another, but if a veteran does have a DD-214 and they also have a disability, they're definitely getting preference on civil service jobs and federal jobs. We have a pretty active employment service at Bedford, so they will be helping veterans if they know of jobs and they know of skill sets of veterans who are seeking work. So they'll try to connect them together. We know that a lot of local employers who are very veteran friendly will get together with our employment service and say, this is the type of employee that I'm looking for, and hopefully make a match there. Mm-hmm.
As a government contractor, the VA is the only federal agency that goes out. If you're not a veteran, don't even bother to bid. Preference to veterans.
Yes, sir.
I would like to compliment the prescription assistance. I'm World War II, and I use Medicare, a lot of doctors. But I always have them fax the prescription to the VA, and their service is wonderful. And mail it right to your house.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. That's something I didn't mention when I was talking about benefits, that prescriptions are part of what we provide at the VA. We have a pharmacy on campus, and one of the choices that veterans have is they can get their prescriptions mailed directly to them. We also have an online system called My Healthy Vet, where veterans can log on, email their doctors, refill their prescriptions, download their medical records, and check their appointments. And that's another technology advancement in the last couple of years that we're really excited about. But yeah, the pharmacy is great.
Have they worked out the problems between Boston and Bedford as far as electronically, like progress reports and things like that? Because we're on the fringe of the Boston system.
Right.
What do you see in the future? Are they, like, they don't reflect my appointments at Jamaica Plain or West Roxbury?
Right.
Maybe they've corrected that by now, but there was a lot of confusion confusion or problems because Bedford was not officially part of the Boston system.
Right, so the comment is about how we're so close geographically to Boston that a lot of veterans also utilize the VA hospital services in the Boston area and Bedford. And though we are all one VA, the medical record isn't quite always on the same screen on the computer. And so that was one of the goals when there was a proposal to actually combine those. And I believe that's something that's still being worked on. It was going to be a very long process. So it hasn't happened yet, but I believe it's still on the table. I'm hoping that it is. Yes, sir?
It is still on the table. Part of the problem is every facility has a firewall, and when you go out of Bedford and you go into Boston, but if your primary care makes the reference to Boston to get, say, a hearing, then it's much easier. The researchers have no problem going through firewalls. General practitioners aren't really that good at going from one firewall to another. So they're making progress, but that's the core issue.
When you mention benefits tied to combat, does that literally mean combat or just deployed to a area in which combat takes place?
For that 5 years of free care, is that what you were referencing?
I just heard a couple of you people mention
Yeah.
the word combat today, and I wonder, does that really mean that these guys had been literally involved in the shooting part of the war, or were they just deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan?
Good question, because this comes up all the time where a veteran isn't quite sure how to even identify themselves, if they should identify themselves as a combat vet or not. So when I was saying that, in the context of our benefits, so if a veteran comes back, say, from Iraq or Afghanistan, their DD-214, their discharge papers indicate that's where they've deployed, they come into the VA system as a combat vet. Their job may have been personnel on a base, but in our eyes, for their benefit, they're considered a combat vet. When they see their doctor, to have that 5 years of free care for anything related to deployment, they have to communicate what the issue was. So for some people who were in infantry or they were transportation, weapons, they were, in firefights, it's pretty clear cut, it's a combat injury. For someone else who maybe was nearby but not in direct fire, they would have to explain it still as a deployment-related injury. If we're talking high blood pressure, that it was an illness that they had before they left, or it was something, appendicitis, perhaps they wouldn't have seen that as a combat-related injury. For the disability side of the benefit, it has to have just been something on active duty, not necessarily in a combat situation. So I think these are really good questions. These are questions we get from our veterans and providers all the time about the language that's used. And so it kind of depends on the context. Hey, if you deployed to a combat zone, I consider you a combat vet with combat injuries. However, a lot of veterans will only identify that way if they were in a direct firefight situation, and that's not always the case.
I just want to thank you very much for a very informative presentation.
Thank you.
And on that note, Elizabeth, you were fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.